quiet.
We heard you were coming.
Ready to go? I'd like to call this meeting of the Tabernacle Township Committee to order. Please join me in saluting the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have sunshine notice. This meeting is called pursuant to the Open Public News Law. This meeting of December the 20th, 2017 was included in a list of notices sent to the Central Record, Burlington County Times and Courier Post, posted on the bulletin board in Town Hall, and has remained continuously posted as required notices under the statute. In addition, a copy of this notice is and has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. We have Mr. Barton.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Franzen.
here.
Mr. Yates. Mayor Lee.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, LaShawn. At this point, I'm going to open up the meeting to public comment on agenda items only. If you're interested in being here this evening, please raise your hand. And I will call on you to limit your comments, please, to 3 minutes. I'll open this meeting to the public at this time. Mr. Brooks, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to everyone.
And you are?
I am Stuart Brooks. I reside on Moore's Meadow Road.
Thank you.
Regarding the engineer's report, I'm hoping, Mr. Gundy, that you might include a status update on the grant application or applications, singular and plural, to DOT, excuse me. I also have 2 comments on the bill list. One shows on my page 4, that's the handout of page 4, the designation is Russo's Farm Market, Russ 33. And my question concerns the reference to positive decision-making. There's a $450 expense, but my question is, what is positive decision-making? I guess the second question to that is, what was bought for $450?
Positive decision-making happens in this building every day, Mr. Brooks.
I realize that, or at least I realize that's the goal. So it's surprising that on only one day of the year the township decided to make a $450 statement regarding it.
And you get what you pay for.
Municipal Alliance Program.
Yes, that's true.
Municipal Alliance Program.
Municipal Alliance Program.
And its purpose is,
What's the purpose of the Municipal Alliance?
what's the purpose of the positive decision-making program, or shall I say it's to enhance positive decision-making?
There was an expense for Municipal Alliance.
Okay, thank you. I can accept that, thank you.
Okay.
On my page 5, there's a note, tab 70, Tabernacle Rescue Squad, $27,522.90, and the note is reimbursement - waiver of balance. Could you tell us what that is, and what is that a budgeted amount? How does that number, $27,522, how does that relate to the budgeted amount?
Budget amount was $35,000. That's the reimbursement for not balanced billing residents of Tabernacle Township for charity care within Tabernacle Township. They present us that invoice by the end of the year, and we reimburse them for it.
So the
Required.
So I understand that, so the $35,000 was the budgeted amount, and the $27,522.90 is the actual amount?
We pay the actual amount.
I'm sorry.
We pay the actual amount.
Which is $27,522.90?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Kramer, and maybe I'm wrong, weren't we going to do that on a quarterly basis? Or are we doing it on a quarterly basis?
We're doing it when they present us with the bill.
But didn't we ask to do that quarterly?
We altered it to do it quarterly if they wish.
So we're leaving it up to them to do it quarterly?
When they get their records and they want to be reimbursed, we reimburse them. But I must have
So in other words, they want to be reimbursed and they want to be reimbursed. I got it.
They must do it by the end of the year.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mr. Brooks. Any other comments this time? Mrs. Brooks, you want to?
Good evening, thank you. Fran Brooks, Moore's Meadow Road. Just a few things on the bill list. I see that repairs were made to the chairlift, and we're also going to be, there's a resolution on tonight's agenda to put in, submit monies for, or an application to replace the existing chairlift.
That is correct.
So, but these were repairs that actually needed to be done.
In order for it to function and meet the standard we need for court meetings, yes.
Ah, okay.
There's a stop the bleeding.
It's the stopwatch?
There's a stop the bleeding before we rip it out of the building.
Okay.
I wasn't very happy about it myself, to be honest.
Yeah, it seems about, well, maybe it can be solved after we get a new chairlift, if we get the grant.
Or we can build a new building.
Well, I don't know about that. On page 3, the row 50, there are 2 items. Are these purchases, what are these purchases, and are they for search? The search?
Where are you, Frank?
I'm sorry, page 3, well, it's page 3 on for me.
What's the name of the vendor?
Row 50, row 50, correct. And are these for search purchases, and what was purchased?
It's a Go Light portable radio. It's a remote control. It's a remote control wireless spotlight for Colonel Lowe's vehicle. It's a
It's for emergency management.
yeah, it's for emergency management.
And both items, the 259 and the 211, were related to that?
I'm going to say yes without getting to the bill yet, but
Yeah, the Go Light, I know what that is specific. I'm not sure about the Action Tech screen beam. Yeah, they did. What's that?
I imagine it'd be emergency management. So
Yeah.
Mr. Brooks
Oh, it's
has the
definitely
same
emergency
line, I
management. Yeah. Do you want to know specifically what the Action Tech screen beam is? Is that what we're,
Sure, that'd
is
be
that what we're
interesting.
looking for?
Yeah,
Why don't we-
well, either of them, it'd be interesting.
Well, I already told you what the first one was. Why don't we do this? Why don't we give Doug a few minutes to go ahead and look at that? Any other comments you want to make at
And
this time?
then, sure. RIC 20, Rick 20, EPL GIF hotline usage 2017, what is that?
What's the name of the vendor?
It's, I have it RIC 20, Rick 20, RIC, Armando Riccio. For $12.50, by the way.
okay.
$12.50 we're talking about? Why don't we give Mr. Kramer a few minutes to look at that? Anything else?
No, I think he has an answer to it.
Okay.
Okay, the first one is the video screen for the EOC,
Uh-huh.
so for emergency management. Just tell me again what was the second item that you were looking for?
Riccio.
There were two charges for the.
That was a
Love.
balance for our GIF hotline usage that we were above our $200 allotted.
What does that actually mean?
It's a labor, they're a labor attorney, and the GIF allows us to spend $200 for labor questions, and we were $212, so it's the $12.
Oh, okay, so Armando Riccio is a labor attorney
Attorney provided by the GIF.
provided by the GIF, and anything over that $200 allocation, the township picks up.
Picks up.
Okay, good explanation, that helps. But I don't think these 2 items for Mr. Lowe, they were both for OEM,
Yes.
not for CERT. Okay, very good. The last thing I just want to quickly ask, at the last meeting, Mr. Barton asked that there be a discussion of the RFP and the public safety director. And everyone who attended that meeting agreed that it would be discussed, but it's not on the agenda, it's not under old business, new business, or any business. And is there a reason why it's not on the agenda?
Just because it is on the agenda under the resolutions or the older new business does not mean it will come up, because if you may note, we have 4 reports: Township Committee, Township Solicitor, Township Administrator, and Township Engineer. So it's very possible we could hear those items under one of those 4 reports for tonight.
Okay, well, fair enough, that's all I needed to know, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the public at this time? Seeing no one, we'll close the public. Motion to approve the bills, please. Thank you, Mr. Second. Mr. Franz, was that you? Yep. Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barton? Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Approval of minutes for regular and executive for November the 13th, and we'll also do November the 27th if we can. Oh, sure. November 13th, please. Need a motion?
For regular.
Oh, you weren't for executive, that's right. Okay. Well, Sean, I want to make this as easy as possible for you. We need to separate, how do we do this? I guess is my question.
Separate the regular and then separate the...
We can't do regular and executive together. So we'll do I need a motion for November 13th regular. Need the approval of minutes for November the 13th regular session, please. Thank you, Mr. Brown, second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Roll call.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. And then now we need a motion for the 13th of November executive session minutes, please.
I'll make it.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Thank you, Mr. Barton. Roll call.
Thank you. Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Abstain.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you.
And now November the 27th regular.
Both of them again,
Why?
because I listened to the recording. I did my homework.
So you listen to one, but you didn't listen to the other one?
We didn't record the executive.
Oh, good point.
And I also listened to the 13th too.
Good point, okay. But we didn't record the executive.
Correct, that's why I can't vote.
Roger, November 27th, regular. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Barton.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Roll call.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. And then the executive session, November 27th. Minutes, please. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Thank you, Mr. Barton. Roll call.
Thank you. Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
No, abstain.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. It's a lot of work, 2 sets of minutes. But we did it. Resolution 2017-89, a performance guarantee reduction of Tabernacle Township Committee pursuant to Chapter 16, Section 13.1 of the Township's revised ordinances. Need a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Need a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2017-90, authorizing the cancellation of certain property taxes and refund pursuant to 100% totally disabled veteran exemption. Need a motion and a second, please. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Any questions or comments?
Mayor, I would just like to say that this gentleman that's getting a reduction in taxes is a disabled veteran from Vietnam War. And, it's provided as a benefit to those who become disabled as a result of their service to the country. And I think it's appropriate. And without divulging his name or any specifics, we do have a lot of documentation on him and on his background. And I just want to thank him for his service, and hopefully he lives a long life, even with his disability.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Any other comments from the committee? Hearing none, need a roll call, please.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2017-91 in support of the FOP Awareness Initiative and awareness of all debilitating diseases. And I'm going to ask for a motion on this as well, please.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Friends. As you may recall, we had some discussion at our last meeting regarding this, and thanks to Mr. Barton for taking the initiative to take this a step further in terms of this resolution. Any questions or comments from the committee? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution 2017-92, authorizing the municipal clerk to close out petty cash fund in the amount of $50. Motion, please. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Roll call.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Resolution 2017-93, authorizing budget transfers at the end of the year. Any motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Need a second?
Mayor, I don't have a copy of that resolution. Do you have a copy of the resolution? Yeah, they have a copy of it.
Mayor, can we table
We
that
sure can.
for January the 2nd, please?
We sure can.
Thank you.
Which one is being,
Resolution 2017-93.
okay,
Need a motion to table, please?
thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can't hear anything. You're in a public meeting.
Mayor, can you go ahead and then move on to the next item?
Yeah, we've already got an approved motion to table this for the January 2nd meeting.
You can't do the budget transfers after the end of the year, so Terry's going to go and grab that resolution and ask everyone to take a look at it. Yeah, the whole
Okay.
point of making the budget
All right.
transfers is so that there's
I understand.
replenish those line items by the end of the year.
Okay, at this point, it's been tabled, we may come back to it. Resolution 2017-94, appointment of fire code, subcode official, fire marshal. Need a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. President. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. And the individual is being appointed, Mr. Thomas Boyd. Any questions or comments from the committee regarding this?
I just have to say that I did sit in the interview process.
That's right, you did.
I did, and both candidates had a lot to bring to the table, but ultimately we chose Mr. Boyd for that position.
I'd like to reinforce for the committee that this position was established to consolidate the original two positions that were in the code book. They were originally bifurcated the duties of the fire inspector in your code to divide those duties between the office duties and the field inspections. This consolidates that again back into one person, which is what's contemplated by the statute in the first place. And also presented, according to the administrator, some savings to the township by consolidating the positions and establishing a new position. So I just want to reiterate that for the committee.
I understand that the state inspectors have been spending quite a bit of time in Tabernacle now that they've seen the writing on the wall. Can someone walk me through or walk us through what the process is going to be in terms of communicating to the state what our intentions are? And how soon we'll be able to transition this process?
Mr. Boyd has been in communications with the state. Once this has passed, he will pass this information with the help of the clerk or with the clerk up to the state Division of Fire. They will review the resolution and get back to us on how quickly they can transfer the duties to the township.
And what's the,
It could be as short as 30 days, it could be as long as the first quarter. So we may not have full jurisdiction until April 1st, but we may have it as soon as February 1st.
anything that the committee can do in terms of reaching out to the state, we'd certainly be willing to do. I know I would, because I think there's a lot of reasons we did this, and frankly, I think if the state finds it necessary to delay this until April or whenever, I think acceptable. So anything we can do to help out is important.
The budget transfer resolution. Well, we could contact them and see what obstacle there is to immediately taking effect. I don't know, I'm sure there are some ins and outs, but my first impression is that it's nothing more than transferring the open files and transferring the badge, the duty and responsibility. So we can explore with them what obstacles may be in their way to transfer immediate responsibility in that regard. I'm not aware of them. That isn't to say that they don't exist, but we should explore it.
Provided the committee concurs, can you help with that process?
Sure, I'll just simply contact the DCA and, talk to the council for that division and see if we can get some feedback in that regard, and I'll report back to the committee and
Great, thank you, Pete.
that'll be my first call, actually.
We had initially tabled resolution 2017-92. What's that? Thought we did.
You voted to table.
No, 94.
No, you did not. I need a roll call on that one.
You got a first and second?
Yes, we do.
Roll call, please.
Mr.
This is for
Barton?
93?
94.
94.
No, 94,
Tom
yes.
Boyd.
Mr. Barton?
Joe?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution 2017-93. We're going to ask for consideration of this resolution. We have copies of the budget transfer, a total of $8,000. I'm going to ask again for a motion for this, please. Thank you, Mrs. Brown.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. Any questions or comments from the committee?
Mayor, we need to read this in the record because there's no public copies of it.
Okay. Whereas the statute provides for appropriation transfers during the last 2 months of the fiscal year to expand for any of the purposes specified. In the budget, an amount in excess of the representative sums appropriated, therefore, and there shall be an excess of any appropriations over and above the amount deemed to be necessary to fulfill the purpose of such appropriation. Whereas the approval of this resolution to be adopted by not less than 2/3 vote of the full membership thereof, transfer the amount of such excess to the appropriations deemed to be insufficient. Now therefore be resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Tabernacle, the following transfers be made. Account 70126310291, which is the public buildings and grounds operating expenses in the sum of $8,000. This amount is to be transferred to municipal court operating expenses in the amount of $5,000, street lighting operating expense in the amount of $1,000, and telephone charges operating expenses in the amount of $2,000, totaling $8,000. So the total transfer from public buildings and grounds operating expense and $8,000 goes to 3 separate accounts: municipal court, street lighting, telephone charges. Any questions or comments in the committee? And we have a first and a second at this point.
No, not at this point.
Okay, can I have a first,
We
please?
did. I made the motion, Rick seconded.
We have a motion from Mrs. Brown and a second from Mr.
From
Franzen.
Franzen, thank
Yep,
you.
thanks. At this point, I'd like a roll call, please.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Under new business, we have public hearing on the 2018 Community Development Application. My question is a public hearing, but maybe it is. Doug, I'm going to ask you to comment on this because I'm not quite sure what we're doing.
Okay. What we're doing is we're having the public hearing for the community development block grant application and the items which we intend to apply for. We intend to apply for the replacement of a wheelchair lift in Town Hall. It is 15 years old. It has had 2 sizable repairs in the last year, in which we've been made notice that some of the parts are getting harder and harder to get. We approached the manager or at the county's office that oversees the community development block grant and asked whether it would qualify since we had purchased it the last time with the community development block grant. The time period was sufficient. She suggested we go ahead and apply for it. We did that. Got some proposed cost figures from a vendor. Worked with Dan on cost figures for what we put the bid together for because it's above the bid threshold. We also, while we were looked at the ramp in front of Town Hall, and we have a deterioration in the section of the ramp from the base up to the top of the sidewalk that's above it. On a recommendation from the engineer, we look to include that as also part of the grant to bring us up to a grant total of around $79,000 with engineering costs and legal costs. The legal costs, the engineering costs are not eligible for the grant, but everything else is, and that's what we hope to apply for. And tonight, as part of the public hearing, we'll take comment from any out of the public on whether they support or don't support the project, and you can use that to weigh on your evaluation.
So are you open to being up to the public at this point?
I'm asking you if you wish to
It's
open
not-
up to the public.
I've never, in my experience in my 7 years here, I've never seen it done this way. We usually have a public hearing, and it's been an advertised public hearing.
And this is an advertised public hearing, it was advertised.
Okay. I don't remember having even, anyway. Unless I missed something, do we know we were talking about this at our last meeting?
No, we did not, because at the time, we didn't think we would be eligible for it. We had no other project that was available. The lift went down, we made some phone calls, and the application period is technically closed, but we have an application open, sitting there, and as part of it, our public hearing is tonight, and then we will finalize this resolution with the open application that's sitting at the county right now, and that will meet the requirements.
Okay. Does the committee have any objection to opening this up to the public at this point? Okay. Therefore, we get 3 more minutes tonight. It must be Christmas.
And
There's a
Hanukkah.
public hearing regarding
Kwanzaa.
the 2018 community development application. Is there any,
Any questions? Or?
at this point, we'll
Sure.
open up the meeting to the public. Mrs. Brooks, come on up.
Sure.
I'll ask a
Take-
few
take your
questions
3
about
minutes.
process here.
Why not?
Okay. Fran Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. I don't see how this can be a public hearing. There's been no first reading, and no one has even had access to the proposal. So from a process standpoint, I don't see how this could be this would have to be first reading. You might have advertised
We
it.
advertised that this was what we had to do. And that
When did you do that? Is that this copy here that's been attached to? I just am a little bit befuddled that you would, why are you even, usually when you submit these applications, you don't hold a public hearing on them.
we're required to hold a public information center, or information point where we tell the public what we're doing and take any suggestions or comments.
Okay, so without really seeing what is being proposed, and I believe everything you said, Doug. Is this, I mean, this is a legal question, is this you may be required by the county to hold a public hearing, but the question is, generally speaking, when there's a public hearing, it's something, a provision goes to first reading, and then where you generally never even ever discuss anything or you don't open it up to the public, let's put it that way, at first reading. If we generally don't have an opportunity to comment, and then you hold 2 weeks later, let's say, your public hearing and second reading, but that's not what's going on here. So, I mean, technically, given what you're applying for, I personally have no objection. I have to wonder, if you don't get the grant, how are you going to fund this? But that's a second comment, but I just, from a process standpoint, I don't really understand how you could consider this a public hearing from a legal standpoint, because there's been no first reading and there's no second reading.
Well, I think what he's saying is that the grant requirements, as I understand it, require some public comment portion. It's not an ordinance to the effect that there be a public hearing as defined by Title 40 or 40A, like when we do an ordinance or that kind of thing. So what they're trying to do is comply with, I think, a little lesser standard in the language of the grant. And I think that the staff is doing their level best to get it in this year so that they can conduct that hearing, and they're asking for the public's cooperation to conduct that public hearing and allow that grant to be submitted this year. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, and also that once they award the grants, there's a public hearing on the award at the county level.
Yeah, and I don't think it's, I
The
mean...
county holds that hearing versus the township, even if they
The
award it to
county
the
does, the
township.
township.
I'm
The
sorry?
county, once they go over the awards of what they're doing for all the municipalities, they hold a public hearing
on their intention to award.
Correct.
And it's, I mean, it's as far as I understand, I heard for the first time tonight too, but it's that, how much money to?
We're applying, the grant is estimated
60.
between $65,000 and $70,000
To replace that lift, right?
to replace the lift and the sidewalk out front.
Is there any other information really to disseminate?
That's all there is right now, because until they approve the grant, we're not going any further.
When did we know that we had to do the public portion?
After the last meeting, between the two meetings. I would have brought it up at the November meeting.
I looked at this afternoon, I wasn't quite sure what was, frankly, I would have actually.
We have
reacted
that,
at the beginning.
maybe hearing is the wrong term.
I think maybe the terminology
is that we have a public comment period.
Right, you allow the public to comment
Which we've done
on
before.
the proposal.
Yeah.
And we've done that before on other issues.
Maybe I'm mistaken by calling it a hearing.
Yeah, I think that was misleading. But, okay, so if we don't get this grant, obviously we have issues with the existing wheelchair lift
It is repaired.
and the ramp outside. How do you plan, if we don't get the block grant, how do you plan to fund that? Are there monies in the current budget, or will you be adding monies to the 2018 budget in order to?
We anticipate getting the grant.
I hope you do, because you're on video right now, recorded, so we'll hope
We
you do it.
anticipate, before we would spend the money, we would anticipate receiving the grant.
Okay, so you're not going to spend any money until you hear about the grant. Is that 100%? Will that grant cover 100% of the cost, or do we have a cost share?
The cost share we have is only the professional fees.
Oh, it's just the professional, engineering and legal. Okay, and what part of that is that? Can you maybe give some information to the public if anybody is wondering about what those costs might be as part of the, is that part of the 79 or in addition?
No, that's part of it.
That's part of it. So,
Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. Time's up. Mr.
my
Brooks.
time is up.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh,
Good dialogue.
yes. Yes, sir.
Sorry for the confusion.
What?
Sorry for the confusion.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm sure everybody feels better that this isn't a standing in for a first reading or second reading, that's all.
Any other, Mr. Brooks, come on up.
Just to follow up on that last point, to clarify the cost, I think you understood that $79,000 is the estimated total cost.
Yes.
And of that, roughly $65,000 to $70,000 are the anticipated hard costs, meaning
60 65 to 70,000 on the anticipated funding available from the grant.
Okay. So does that mean that the legal and engineering costs and any other, what I would call soft costs, are roughly $10,000? I mean,
That's probably a little high.
But, so if I was to take the 79 total and subtract 65 to 70,000 estimated, that would not equal the other costs? That's, as you said, a bit too high.
10,000 is a bit too high. No one's got it.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Could I ask just one more question that, as part of this, excuse me, just.
I'm
be-
sorry.
It'll take
I'm
10
pretty flexible,
seconds,
but I'm
Mayor.
not, well then, you could have asked Stuart, you could have asked the question.
Well, yeah, but I didn't, Fran Brooks, thank you very much. Just
No,
just a
Mrs.
few
Brooks, I'm not
seconds so
gonna do it.
everybody understands. Can we sell that lift, the old lift?
Mrs. Brooks, with all due
Yes.
respect, I didn't ask you to come up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your time is up, I'm
Mayor,
sorry.
I mean, Jesus, I thought we
okay.
lived in a democracy where we can ask questions.
Well, then you can ask questions, you had your opportunity. Thanks.
Well, this
Any
is,
other comments
it's just,
from the
oh,
committee
no.
at this point?
Doug, is there any value, Doug, is there any value in that lift? Your lift?
Thank
There
you,
may be
Mr.
as part-
Barton.
There may be as part of a trade-in. If they don't want it as a trade-in, it is something that we could possibly put on gov deals.
Yeah. I mean, if the company that services it says that it's obsolete, it's hard to get parts, maybe there's some value that somebody wants it for parts.
Yeah,
That may be.
more so than what the scrap value would be.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Thank you, Mr.
Especially given
Barton.
the fact you're putting, I mean, you're buying more parts to keep it running. Anyway,
Yeah.
in the meantime, I'm with you on that. Do we ever get a first and second on this? Resolution 2017-95 authorizing the submission of the application for the CDBG funding for replacement of handicap chair lift in Town Hall. Need a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Brennan, second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. The only comment I'm going to make is that I appreciate next time we have a little more communication directly in terms of how we're going to present this. Roll call, please.
My apologies.
Thank you. Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lee?
Yes. Mr. Guzzi.
Just a couple quick things. We are closing in on finalizing the road evaluation, so we hope to have that completed and a report to the committee probably by your February meeting. Also, we're looking into several different potential funding options and issues related to Carranza Road to try to come up with a plan moving forward for funding the road and also verifying the municipal boundary related to Carranza Road. That's all I had to say.
Dan, any need for us to reach out to Chemung at this point in terms of helping that conversation, or
We can, but there's apparently there's a couple boundary issues that we want to look into first, as far as where the actual municipal boundary is and how much of that road is in Tabernacle versus Chemung for that entire stretch that we're talking about paving. So I want to get that resolved. That's something that came to my attention recently.
Is there a discrepancy with where the line is?
Well, it's, we just want to verify it
More
before
or
we
less.
contact Chemung.
More where the road is than where the line is. We're pretty sure we know where the line is, but we're not sure the road is exactly where it says it is. On the map.
Well, I would be willing to bet that there's people that drive on that road, and they probably know where, they probably drive where the road is.
The mayor's question of where the actual cartway is in relation to the right-of-way and the municipal boundary.
Got it. Okay. Dan, anything else?
That's all.
Thanks.
Okay, we have been approved by the state of New Jersey to participate in the Educational Service Commission of New Jersey Cooperative. We got that approval the other day, which means we can move forward with the carpeting, which we will, as we hear shortly. We also talked about some work up here prior to that, and we've kicked around because we didn't want to hire an architect to redesign everything up here, given all the other things that we're contemplating doing. Just a feeling from the committee on lowering this back to the original level and expanding that, the judge's dais up a little bit so that you could be at that end. We would be able to do that according to our construction official without requiring engineering because we should be on top of the existing floor here and we should be on top of the existing floor there also. So whether you want me to look into that or just carve it exactly the way it is right now.
What's the difference between expanding that and putting it on that wall over there?
Because we'd have to be reestablishing a larger area and a ramp on this side to create a new one by just expanding that slightly.
A ramp?
If we created the dais along this side, our dais, we'd have to have ADA accessibility up to the dais and ramp. Because
You don't
that's
have it
existing.
now.
I know.
But you would do it over there?
Because we were creating 100% new, we'd have to provide it.
If you modify it, the law requires you to come into compliance.
Our modification on that one wouldn't be bringing the percentage up to the requirement.
Okay, so over there, now, be putting ramp over here. Got it.
I have that. Also, our grader operator and I have been talking with Tabernacle Township over a used piece of equipment, grader that they have, that they are going to no longer need and are trading in. They are willing to sell to us at the trading value, at the wholesale value. It is a 2004 piece grader with a minimal amount of hours. And I have been in touch with their Director of Public Works, along with the case dealer, talking about that. The case grader new is around $233,000. It's what Mercer County just paid for one. Their wholesale value seems to be around the $40,000 mark. On Machine Trader, the prices vary between $45 for an older machine up to about $115 for a newer machine. With one in a similar age going on that is about $59,000 what they're asking for. So we seem to be in a good price range, but I guess my feeling is, do you want us to continue to talk to them about that? And I'd like if the mayor can go with me and take a look at it, it'd be greatly appreciated. As a background in equipment that would be helpful, along with our grader operator who's looked at it. We do have funding available in our current budget, in our current capital budget, as a line item for that amount. So we'd be able to not have to buy that, and it would allow us to upgrade our grader approximately 24 years in years. We currently grade between 8 and 12 times a year, a little over 10 miles of road that services 40 homes, 3 gun clubs, 3 farm that are mostly in the core area or the forest area of our township. So the likelihood of us being able to get them paved with Highlands approval is probably slim. So it's something that we're going to have an ongoing need for a number of years. And again, we're running into the same issue that we ran with the wheelchair lift, is that the parts are getting a little tougher to get for, and we're running into having to have parts custom made for our current grader. So
What was the number again? 10 miles of road and grading how many times a year?
Between 8 and 12 times a year, depending on weather. We try to do 12 times a year, but sometimes the winter doesn't cooperate with us.
Are any of those roads also done by the Forest Fire Service?
One is Eagle Road.
How did the discussions, well, he doesn't do Eagle Road. What township records with that Eagle Road?
It has in the past.
Yeah.
We put most of the stone on the road,
Yeah.
but the Forest Fire Service has graded it for the last 2 years for us.
At least. And I plow it. That's the reason I know that.
But that's the road.
What was the discussion with the state? Doug, I've had some dialogue about this already. What was the discussion with the state regarding shared service?
They did not entertain a shared service at this time. They did offer us the ability to work through, actually our fire department would have to work through the purchase on surplus of a grader when it became available. My discussion with them is that they come in spurts. They've just had a spurt of graders, so they probably rolled over a lot they had in one group, but they would keep their eyes out for us, and but they cannot guarantee condition, and realizing that those graders are to military specs, which makes parts a little more difficult to get. Or different methods, you have to go to someone who handles surplus stuff to work, to get the parts from, because the government tends to spec things slightly different for different reasons.
Do you, I'd like to introduce Dave Smith, Chief of Tabernacle Fire. Do you have any issues with getting trucks down the roads or streets?
Just like speed, it all depends on the condition of the road, how fast you go other than that.
In the spirit of trying to find ways to be able to grade roads and to save money at the same time and less impact taxpayers, I also was thinking about Woodland Township. They have quite a few roads are untreated also, and their grader is actually worse than ours is by a long shot. And I thought it might be worthwhile to maybe engage with Mary Alice a little bit about what their needs are, but I think I would wait until after the first of the year. Things have kind of slowed down, obviously. We're trying to get into the year stuff done, but it might be another option to look at. They will never be able to afford a grader, even at the price that we're talking about with their tax base. So it may be a good opportunity for shared service.
Shared service, so we can
And
develop some funds.
And it's different, and that's a different relationship you would have with the Forest Fire Service.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I provided the committee some work papers for the public safety director and also RFP for emergency medical and rescue services. Please look them over. If you have any comments or we want to have a discussion with them at a future meeting or something like that, we'd be glad to go over them. They are not finalized documents. They are working documents. But they attempted to meet all the requirements that I've gotten out of the discussions that have happened in township meetings and the requests that have been made. So.
Being that we just got this a couple days ago, do we want to absorb this a little bit?
Yeah, I need really a little more time. I mean, I glanced through it, but I just, like you said, we got them a few days ago, and I think we should take the time, since we've taken a lot of time to get this prepared, to look at it, take a close look at this stuff.
Okay. Mr. Barr, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Doug, is that in a Word document?
Yes, it is.
Both of them, could you send them to us in a Word document? Or which one, were they in the Word document when you sent them? Okay, never mind, then I already have them, Doug. I want to thank Doug for preparing them 2 documents. Doug, getting back to the grader,
Yes.
that 10 miles of road, how do you snowplow those 10 miles?
Depending on how deep the snow is,
Mhm.
it's within probably 4 or 5 inches, 6 inches. We'll do it with a truck. Lower the smaller truck, go down 2 or 3 inches. Truck 4 normally pushes the snow on that. When it gets deeper, we have a plow for our existing grader, and we mount that and
So you used a grader to plow snow on that 10 mile
on those
road also.
dirt roads,
So that's another use of the grader. And of course, I mean, it's common sense that those roads have to be maintained in good shape so that when it does snow, you can plow them.
yes.
And that when there is an emergency, a fire truck or an ambulance can get down the roads.
And the grader also gives us the capability, if we get ice on there, that they can with the grader blade itself, try to remove some of that ice.
Okay, so if it's heavier snow, the grader plows them 10 miles of roads.
And that's even a challenge, to be honest. It's not easy.
Sometimes it's with the loader and the grader.
And and to be honest, I think there's only a handful of people that I personally know that can run a grader. It's a very difficult piece of equipment to operate. Everett Haynes probably was the best operator we had, in my opinion.
Probably. I've had Charlie for over 30 years as our grader operator, and he took over from Everett. Everett gave him some lessons, and he took over, and he grew up in an equipment family, so he was used to bulldozers and that type of stuff and around equipment, and has been our grader operator for over 30 years.
Hey Doug, how do you know when to grade them roads? Do you inspect them? Do you wait for somebody to call?
Between Charlie and I, Charlie still comes and takes an eye on, I keep an eye on, plus we listen to complaints.
Okay, good, thank you.
I think we're going to plan to absorb the documents, so that you still need a copy of them. Kim is missing one of the documents.
Okay, which,
Conveniently, the RFP.
okay.
So you can,
Conveniently, because I listened to the tape and I didn't hear the committee direct, and I never want to request for it.
Doug, anything else?
I was asked about the CERT expenses for 2017. I'm not through everything as of this point. It appears, based on the records I have not quite up to the end of the year, that we've spent $511.49 out of the budget for the CERT. And the CERT has spent $2,571 out of their FEMA reimbursement money for their labor during the last 2 storms. That's all I have.
Okay. Pete?
Mayor, I don't have anything for public comment or consideration, but the clerk and I have circulated some materials on some executive session minute items, and hopefully we can get to those in the first part of the new year and discuss that. So that's all I have for tonight.
So no executive session tonight?
There is some consideration of those materials that have to be, if the committee wanted to do that, but I think that it does take some time to digest some of the information that's been supplied. So I don't want to delay it unduly, but tonight might be premature. If we could do it early on in the year, should we afford that opportunity, that'd be great.
It's okay with you guys?
Yeah, sure.
I forgot 4 nods, okay. Okay, anything else, Pete?
That's it.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Bart?
On Monday, the 18th, I accompanied the mayor, our engineer, and administrator to a Tabernacle School Board meeting, which I'll let the mayor report on that later. about properties the school board owns. Also, Mayor, we received a local finance notice, and it's Governor Christie's Executive Order 237, which permits residents to prepay their property taxes this year for next year. How the IRS will treat that, I guess, will remain to be seen. But Natalie tells me we've had a very busy week with people prepaying their taxes. Normally, our employees go home a half a day tomorrow, and I would suggest that we leave the tax office open till the end of the day, and whoever has to stay to staff that, Doug and Mayor, if everybody agrees, give them that comp time at a later date. I think that would give the residents that extra time to come in if they want to prepay their taxes. I don't think they'll be anticipating that this building will be closed tomorrow at 12. I'm not sure that we advertise that, so something that I think we should do for the residents.
Offices will be open.
The tax office will be open till the end of the day tomorrow?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Just the tax office.
Well, the tax collector will not be here, but Natalie and I will be here, so
Okay.
they can pay their taxes.
And we'll make sure you get that half a day at a later date. Hopefully, maybe when you get ready to go on vacation. Again, I want to thank Doug for preparing the Public Safety Director job specification and the request for proposal for emergency services. And also, I want to thank Doug and Public Works for keeping the lights on the Christmas tree and the gazebo during a windy Christmas week. I know they were out quite a bit, and thank you, Doug, and you and your team for keeping the lights on the trees throughout the holiday season. And last but not least, I just want to wish everyone happy holidays, and may you all have a healthy and prosperous 2018.
Mr. Francis.
Thanks to Santa, too, for showing up at our, and participating in the tree lighting ceremony, as well as, I mean, it's hard to thank everybody who was involved in that, because you're inevitably going to skip someone. But as I look around the room, it looks to me like just about everybody in the room was there that night working on something. Fire company, especially with the lights, and helping take that big tent down at the end of the night, which was a lot of help. We appreciate that. And it was another good event. Our attendance estimates were up over last year's. We learned that there were a few things we need to do better when we did a little meeting afterwards to kind of dissect what had been done. And we're looking forward to an even bigger and better event in 2018. And as Joe said, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and best wishes in the new year to all of you.
How do you keep getting that good weather, Rick?
Well, we had rain one year, but we were lucky. I know you had to sit on that truck for a long time, and that's one of the things we'll deal with next year.
Well, that's good that we can get more songs in, right?
Yeah. Joe, I was singing there while we're waiting for you. I'm not allowed to sing in the shower.
It's a good thing I was still on that truck.
We got to get you there quicker. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Mrs. Brown.
I just wanted to apologize for not making the last meeting. I had a family emergency and unfortunately could not be at the meeting. Sorry about that.
See you Tuesday. Big day for you. Okay, I've got a couple things. As Joe mentioned, we met Dan and Doug and I and did a presentation over at the Board of Ed, what they call committee as a whole meeting, to discuss, essentially really to discuss possible land uses. One of the things that I think is important to keep in mind is the fact that this board and the school board essentially are the ones that oversee the operations of the township, and we have a responsibility to the taxpayers to do that efficiently and work together collectively to look at long-range planning when it comes to land use. And the school board and the school district has land, and we have land, but whose land it really is belongs to the taxpayer. So what we talked about was what some of our needs are, or what we believe our needs are. and what some of the school board's needs are. And one of the things we talked about was the potential of a new town hall. We talked about working on this building, needing to have access to the septic facility, talking about what other uses we may have down the road. But the moral of the story is it was a committee of a whole discussion regarding land use in Tabernacle. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is the sense of community we have. And that was the main reason for getting in front of the school board and doing an in-depth presentation just to talk about, hey, these are some ideas we have. What do you guys think? What are your needs? And we're going to talk again at the liaison committee meeting coming up the second or third week of January. So we'll go back to having our subcommittee meeting to talk about specifics, but it was really the first time we've sat down and had a detailed discussion about, hey, here's where we are, here's where we may need to think about going. Let's try to combine the resources together. Because at the end of the day, we're representing the taxpayers regardless of whether you sit on this board or the school board. So I think overall it's a good discussion. It really makes you think about what the town's going to look like in 20 and 25 years from now. But it's the kind of discussion we need to have. So I was pleased to do that. I also just want to make reference to our first responders for the accident at Carranza Road and Flat Road last week. We can have certainly not a pleasant experience to go through, but the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that there was communication between the school board and between Sequoia in terms of communication to parents about what was happening with school buses and whatnot, and our teams were on the scene. So certainly appreciate the combined effort to not only communicate to the residents what was going on and what roads were closed, et cetera, but also to the responders that were working. So certainly appreciate the team effort with that. That's all I've got, and at this point we'll open up to the meeting of the public. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. Stuart Brooks, Moores Meadow Road. Excuse me. I got 4 comments. In 2017, the committee met 16 times, and in prior years, you've generally met twice a month, roughly 20 to 24 times total. But my question is, if this 16 meetings a year that took place this year, is that a new standard? Is that the new normal? And if it is, why is it? How was that decision made, or why was it made? Secondly, Mr. Mayor Lee, this I think is directed to you because you're the primary liaison to the school board.
Actually, Mr. Barton and I share that role.
All right, well, I'll make this to everyone, and my comment is that it's good that we're talking about land use, and it is important. Given the recent taxes and the change in the tax laws, it's pretty clear that the budget has become even more important. Comments been made in past years that education costs, or Board of Education levies are going up almost an automatic 2% a year, yet our enrollment is going down. I think another subject that should be on the agenda for the liaison group is that they should keep their budget in line, and efforts should be made to reduce their budget, or at least not raise it.
I would also invite you to attend the school board meeting and tell them the same thing.
Point well made, and I think that you have a bully pulpit that we don't. But
well, actually, to be perfectly honest, members of the public have more power than I do. At the liaison committee, and I'll just be honest, at the liaison committee, we talk about a lot of different issues, but the school board makes their own decision in terms of budgetary numbers. I recognize that annually, since we made the change in terms of moving the election to November, that every single year, the school board has made an increase in the tax, 2% every year. But I don't make those decisions. The decisions made by the board today. But my point was that we will certainly communicate that message that we received today, but I would also encourage you to attend that meeting as well.
Good point. Thank you. Thirdly, the FEMA reimbursements that are made back to CERT, would the $470 that was paid for the Go Light and the video screen, would they be eligible for that reimbursement? So there's reimbursement monies to use to purchase those expenses, those items.
I'll have to check to see whether they were.
Okay. Lastly, does the committee have a target date for getting a fire truck in the ESB? For roughly, we're moving on 6 years since the ESB was built, and 8 years since it was bonded. I saw when I came in that both chiefs were here. I guess they still are here. I know the committee members, I think, have all been on record as wanting to get this done ASAP. I wonder if the chiefs could each comment on what the holdup is from their perspective, because I think there are only 3 groups involved, and I don't know why it's not getting done or what the holdup is, and if that can be clarified tonight, I think it would be good to identify the obstacles, as Peter mentioned, and the other issues, so we can try and work on them and resolve them. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the public at this time? Mrs. Brooks? Just the alarm. Hey, you just made it.
Positive decision.
Fran Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. My first thing, this is in regard to the fire marshal information. I'm not sure why, or maybe you could clarify why Mr. Lang has to call DCA when we have an administrator who can call and get that information about the fire marshal provisions and what is needed to make the transfer. It doesn't seem to me that we should have to pay Mr. Lang, in all due respect, Mr. Lang, to do that work when Doug Kramer is perfectly capable of doing it, and it would not be a charge that would accrue to the residents of Tabernacle, an additional charge. So I
will tell you, it'll be a team effort, because he's working with, as they do on a lot of other issues, with Mr. Boyd and Mr. Kramer and Mr. Lang, the 3 of them, as well as Natalie, LaShawn, and Terry, and Dan, who are all here. They work collectively together, doing a lot of different jobs collectively. And there's a lot of stuff that we get billed for, there's a lot of stuff we don't get billed for. But I certainly take your point.
Okay. Also, at the last meeting, Jim Jones made the comment that he did not have to submit an over request to the construction office for the chicken permits that he was seeking. And apparently from those comments, he also said that Mr. Boyd simply didn't require that he submit an over request. So I want to know if all the people who submit over requests, including me, can have the same access to public records that Mr. Jones had with regard to submitting, any records, because it doesn't matter whether it's chicken records or any other record. Is there some kind of preferential list that you have that allows some people to, or requires some people to submit open requests like myself, while you have Mr. Jones wanting public records and not having to submit an open request? Because if you have a preferential list, I'd sure like to be on that preferential list. So I'd like to hear from the clerk, since she's really the person who controls these decisions as to who has to submit an open request for public documents. But it seemed very clear from Mr. Jones's discussion that he didn't have to submit any open request for the public records that he was seeking. So,
Well, I will tell you that the comments that you make tonight are to be directed to the committee, the 5 of us, the elected officials. And I will allow the clerk to comment if she would like, but I will also tell you that, to my knowledge, there is no preferred list, as you would call it.
I'm kind of making a joke, that was tongue in cheek.
Well, I will also say to you that there have been a lot of times where we have had discussion here, and there have been documents that we have talked about that I have said there's no need to have an open request. You can pick up this form downstairs at 9 o'clock the next day, or 8 o'clock, whatever time.
Which is a very good
So
thing.
I will tell you that there have been circumstances where records have been made available by the township without OPA request, and we've done that collectively. And each one of us has done that at one time or the other. So I want to be clear, there's not a preferred OPA request club that you need to belong to or what have you, that doesn't exist.
Well, I think what I'm really getting at in all due respect is that there's inconsistency here. And it isn't clear what your policy and practice really is. And so either people are required to submit OPA requests or they're not required to submit OPA requests. But that decision really should be consistently applied. It's the policy and practice that needs to be clarified and made. So that's my comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Fran, if I understand, are you saying that Mr. Jones would look in the construction files at who had chickens and who did not have chickens? And
No, he wanted to, it was my understanding that he wanted to get all of the records regarding the permits that residents had submitted
Right, so the resident-
regarding the chicken
Okay,
ordinance.
so the resident fills out a permit, that permit goes in their lot and block file, right?
I guess I don't know how, I don't know how
think
this
that's-
construction
So we're showing,
office
is that-
organizes them.
shouldn't that be an open request in order to get into someone's lot and block construction file to see what's in that file?
My understanding is, if you allow me to interject, that
Sure.
Mr. Jones was just provided with the numbers. I don't know that he actually received any documents, but we can clarify that. But certainly, it's always been a longstanding policy of the committee and the clerk to provide and require OPA requests. An isolated abrogation of that rule doesn't make it, a policy, if that did in fact occur. And certainly, it's always been the policy, as I understand it, that be directed to make an OPA request for a public record.
Yeah, I think it was probably a very simple question that said, please provide me with all of the records showing the chicken permits. And, since the ordinance was adopted in 2016, I don't know if it was adopted in 2016, but it could have been just a very general statement that said, I want all those records that have to do with the chicken permits. And that's what he was actually referring to, Mr. Barton, when he spoke about it, because I listened to the recording and heard what he said exactly. And he thanked Mr. Boyd specifically for not requiring that he submit an OPA request, okay? And
Irrespective of what might happen, it's the policy of the clerk to require
Okay.
an OPA request.
Well, I think that it's important that the township maintain consistency in how it provides, in its policy and practice with regard to making documents responsive to citizens.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Okay?
Any other comments from the public at this time? Seeing no one, we'll close the public. Anything else from the committee? Anything else from that side of the table? Thank you, folks. Motion to adjourn? All in favor?
When is reorganization? When is the reorganization meeting? That was never
It was
announced.
published actually some time ago, but it's January the 2nd, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock, January 2nd.